Troy, once a bastion of civilization, now succumbed to the insatiable flames of war. The Greeks, after 10 long years, had finally breached our walls. I, Aeneas, watched from the ramparts, the smell of burning timber and the screams of my people filling the air. The fighting was fierce, a desperate struggle for survival. Every street became a battlefield, every house a potential tomb. I fought alongside my comrades, but the tide had turned. Troy was doomed. Amidst the carnage, I received a vision. The gods, or perhaps just my ancestors, appeared before me, veiled in light and ancient wisdom. They commanded me to flee, to gather my kin, and to seek a new Troy in the distant west. With the divine mandate echoing in my soul, I sought out my family. My son, Aeneas, was but a boy, his innocence a stark contrast to the horrors unfolding around him. My father, Anchises, though weakened by age, held the sacred relics of our ancestors. I bore him upon my shoulders, a heavy burden both physically and spiritually. I gathered the survivors on the shores, those who had escaped the city's wrath. Weary and defeated, they looked to me for guidance, for hope in the face of utter despair. The beach became a haven for the displaced, a place of mourning and quiet desperation. We were refugees, stripped of our home, our possessions, our very identity. Then I tasked them with rebuilding, with constructing ships that would carry us away from the ashes of Troy. Every hammer blow was a testament to our resilience, a defiance against the fate that had befallen us. With heavy hearts but unwavering resolve, we set sail. The shores of Troy receded into the distance, swallowed by the vast expanse of the sea. Our destination, a new home, a new destiny. My son, Aeneas, looked back at the receding coastline, his young mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of our loss and the uncertainty of our future. "Where are we going, father?" he asked. "To a new Troy, my son," I replied, though even I did not know what awaited us. The setting sun cast long shadows across the water as we sailed westward. I stood at the helm, my hand firm on the tiller, my eyes fixed on the horizon. The journey would be long and arduous, but I was determined to fulfill my destiny. Our journey began with tempest. The sea, angered by our escape, unleashed its fury upon us. The storm raged for days, threatening to swallow us whole and extinguish the last embers of Troy. The gods were testing us, and our journey was far from over. From the ashes of Troy, we sailed, a fleet of lost souls seeking a new dawn. The weight of our past clung to us like the sea salt that coated our skin. I, Aeneas, bore the burden of a shattered kingdom and the hope of a future yet unseen. Days turned into weeks as we navigated the treacherous waters. A tempest, unleashed by a vengeful god, threatened to swallow us whole. The waves, like ravenous beasts, clawed at our vessels, testing the strength of our resolve. I fought to keep our ships afloat, praying to any god who would listen. The storm raged for days, scattering our fleet and testing the limits of our endurance. Loss became a constant companion. When the storm finally subsided, we found ourselves scattered across unfamiliar shores. We were refugees, stripped bare, clinging to life with the tenacity of weeds. I gathered my people, reminding them of the prophecy, of the destiny that awaited us in Italy. Hope, though fragile, was our only weapon against despair. We ventured inland, seeking resources and shelter. But the lands were not always welcoming. We encountered tribes, some hostile, some wary, all vying for survival in a world of scarcity. We faced creatures born of nightmare and folklore. Harpies, with their foul stench and insatiable hunger, descended upon us, defiling our meager supplies. The earth itself seemed to conspire against us. Volcanic eruptions and treacherous currents tested our seamanship and our courage. Death became commonplace. Children, elders, warriors all succumbed to the hardships of our journey. Each loss chipped away at our collective spirit. Yet amidst the suffering, the flame of hope flickered. My son, Aeneas, looked to me for strength, reminding me of the future we were striving to build. Then one fateful morning, land appeared on the horizon. A new beginning, a chance to rebuild, a glimmer of hope in a sea of despair. Our long voyage was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, we had a direction. Little did we know that this new land, this Carthage, would bring both solace and heartbreak, testing the very foundations of my destiny. But that is a story for another time. Land, after what felt like an eternity adrift, a new shore rose from the horizon. Carthage. Mayhap's fate has finally decided to smile upon us. Even young Aeneas, who had known little but war and sorrow, felt the stirrings of hope as we approached the Carthaginian coast. Carthage, a city that mirrored what Troy once was, perhaps even better. We were greeted not as conquerors, but as weary travelers seeking respite. Dido, their queen, known for her wisdom and compassion, had granted us safe harbor. Queen Dido, her presence radiating both power and grace, welcomed us with open arms. She was a beacon of hope in our darkest hour. I approached the queen, offering my deepest gratitude for her benevolence. In her eyes I saw not judgment, but understanding. That evening, at her invitation, I recounted the tale of Troy's fall. Each word was heavy, like a stone laid upon my soul. I spoke of the 10-year siege, the cunning of Odysseus, the wooden horse that sealed our doom. I painted a vivid picture of chaos and destruction, a city consumed by flames. Dido, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, listened intently. She, too, had known loss and betrayal. In that shared sorrow, a bond began to form. I recounted our escape, the weight of my father on my shoulders, the hand of my son in mine. The gods demanded much. That night Aeneas slept soundly, oblivious to the burdens of his lineage. Mayhaps he would not know the horrors I had seen. As the dawn broke, I stood overlooking the city. Carthage offered sanctuary, but my destiny lay elsewhere. The gods had shown me Italy, and I must obey. Though my heart felt heavy with the decision I knew I would eventually have to make. The sun rose on Carthage, painting the city in hues of gold and amber. Aeneas, still burdened by the weight of Troy, found himself drawn to the burgeoning city, a testament to Dido's strength and vision. In the great hall, Aeneas shared the tragic tale of Troy's demise with Dido. She listened with rapt attention, her heart touched by his courage and his loss. A bond began to form, forged in shared experiences of hardship and leadership. Days turned into weeks, and Aeneas and Dido spent much time in each other's company. They discussed matters of state, of war, and of their pasts. With each conversation, their respect and affection for one another deepened. Dido, childless herself, found joy in the company of Aeneas. She treated him with kindness and affection, further solidifying the bond between herself and Aeneas. The alliance between the Trojans and the Carthaginians brought prosperity to both peoples. Trade flourished, and the combined strength of their armies ensured their safety against potential enemies. Dido found herself increasingly drawn to Aeneas, not just as a leader or an ally, but as a man. She dared to dream of a future where Carthage and Troy would be united under their rule, a future filled with love and prosperity. Aeneas, too, felt the pull of love. He was captivated by Dido's strength, her intelligence, and her beauty. But he could not forget his destiny, the prophecy that called him to Italy. Dido, emboldened by her love, publicly announced her intention to marry Aeneas, declaring a new era of peace and prosperity for Carthage and Troy. Torn between his love for Dido and his duty to his people and the gods, Aeneas sought guidance from the divine. He prayed for a sign, a clear path to follow. Even young Aeneas sensed the conflict brewing within his father. He overheard whispers of a destiny that lay beyond Carthage, a destiny that threatened to tear his family apart. For a brief moment, Aeneas allowed himself to be lost in Dido's embrace, to forget the burdens of his past and the uncertainties of his future. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Aeneas stood upon the Carthaginian shore, a messenger arrived, bearing news that would forever alter the course of his life and the fate of Carthage. The gods had spoken, and his destiny awaited him in Italy. The moon, a silent witness, cast long shadows across the Carthaginian gardens as Aeneas sought solace in prayer. Doubts gnawed at his heart, a tempest mirroring the storms he had weathered at sea. The whispers of destiny, once a guiding star, now felt like a cruel burden. From her balcony, Dido surveyed her city, a beacon of prosperity built by her own hand. But tonight, the glittering lights offered no comfort. A sense of unease had settled upon her, a premonition of a storm brewing on the horizon. Aeneas bolted upright in his bed, drenched in sweat. A vision, vivid and terrifying, had pierced his sleep. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, his face stern, delivering a divine command, Italy awaited, his destiny unfulfilled. Innocence slumbered peacefully. Aeneas, oblivious to the agonizing choices that plagued his father, dreamt of heroic deeds and a future yet unwritten. His future depended on his father's decision. The dawn brought no respite. Aeneas wrestled with the cruel dilemma, love versus duty, desire versus destiny. Could he abandon Dido, a queen who had offered him sanctuary in her heart? Could he ignore the gods' decree and forsake his people's future? Dido sought Aeneas in the gardens, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and foreboding. She sensed a change in him, a distance that chilled her soul. "What troubles you, my love?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. With a heavy heart, Aeneas revealed the divine command, the burden of his destiny. His words, though carefully chosen, fell like hammer blows, shattering the fragile peace they had found. "I must leave Dido," he confessed, his voice thick with regret. Dido's world crumbled around her. Betrayal, raw and agonizing, ripped through her. "Is this how you repay my kindness?" she cried, her voice laced with fury and despair. "You swore you loved me." Aeneas stood firm, his heart breaking with each word Dido hurled at him. But the fate of his people, the promise of a new Troy, outweighed his personal desires. He could not waver, even as her pain tore at his soul. Under the cover of darkness, the Trojans prepared to depart. Ships were readied, sails unfurled, and oarsmen braced themselves for the long voyage ahead. The harbor, once a symbol of hope and refuge, now echoed with the sounds of a sorrowful departure. From the cliffs of Carthage, Dido watched as the Trojan ships faded into the horizon. Her heart, consumed by grief and vengeance, unleashed a curse upon Aeneas and his descendants, a curse that would echo through the ages. Aeneas, his heart heavy with sorrow, set his gaze towards Italy. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril, but destiny beckoned. He sailed on, carrying the weight of Troy's past and the hopes of a future empire. The dawn bled across the sky, but brought no solace to Dido. Each sail that carried Aeneas further away tore at her heart, leaving a wound that festered with each passing moment. The queen's grief consumed her, turning the once vibrant palace into a reflection of her inner turmoil. The order she had so meticulously crafted crumbled under the weight of her despair. Night after night, she haunted the gardens, a ghost in her own kingdom, seeking solace in the memories that now only brought her pain. Desperate, Dido turned to darker arts, seeking answers and revenge in the whispers of ancient magic, her once clear mind clouded by a thirst for retribution. A curse born of heartbreak and rage echoed through the heavens, a dark prophecy aimed at Aeneas and all his descendants. "May there be war between our peoples for all eternity," she cried. With a chilling resolve, Dido ordered the construction of a pyre, a symbol of her lost love and her impending doom. The air crackled with unspoken dread. She clutched Aeneas's sword, a cold reminder of her betrayal, and with a final, heart-wrenching farewell, prepared to meet her fate. With unwavering steps, Dido climbed the pyre, embracing the flames as a release from her torment. Her spirit, though broken, remained unbent. The pyre roared, a funeral pyre for a broken heart, and a kingdom plunged into mourning. The smoke carried Dido's curse into the winds, a promise of future conflict. Far across the sea, Aeneas saw the distant glow of the pyre. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that Dido was gone. Yet destiny called him onward. Young Aeneas, too young to fully understand the tragedy, stood beside his father, sensing the weight of loss that hung heavy in the air. The seeds of destiny, sown in sorrow, began to sprout. The ship sailed on, carrying the Trojans towards their uncertain future. The curse of Dido lingered in the air, a shadow looming over their destiny, a harbinger of wars to come. The price of a kingdom was steep indeed. After what felt like an age upon the unpredictable waves, the shores of Italy finally greeted our weary eyes. A collective breath of hope swept through the fleet, a silent promise of a new beginning. "Father, look!" Aeneas's voice, sharp with excitement, sliced through my weary thoughts. His youthful enthusiasm was a balm to my burdened soul. Our ships groaned as they beached upon the Italian sand. I was the first to step onto the shore, my feet sinking into the soft earth. This was it, our new home, fraught with both promise and peril. My men followed, their faces etched with the weariness of our long journey, yet their eyes burned with the determination that had carried us this far. They formed ranks, a shield wall against the unknown. Even as we secured our landing, we were not alone. Farmers, simple folk of this land, watched us from a distance. Their apprehension was palpable, their curiosity warring with fear. I approached them, unarmed, offering a sign of peace. We were not here to conquer, but to seek refuge and a new home. Word of our arrival reached their elders. Soon, a small delegation arrived, their faces etched with the wisdom of age and experience. We were led to their king, Latinus, a man of great age and evident wisdom. He listened patiently as I recounted our tale of woe, the fall of Troy, and our long and arduous journey. "We ask only for a place to rebuild, a chance to live in peace. We offer our strength, our skills, and our loyalty," I pleaded, hoping to sway his heart. Latinus considered my words, his gaze sweeping over us. He saw not invaders, but desperate souls seeking respite from the storm. Aeneas, ever the diplomat, presented a gift, a small, carved horse, a reminder of our past, but also a symbol of our willingness to start anew. Latinus accepted the gift, a smile gracing his lips. "Perhaps," he said, "a new dawn is indeed possible. Let us speak further and see if we can forge a path to peace together. The land of Latium offered promise, yet unease coiled within me. The Latins, though initially welcoming, harbored a simmering resentment. Whispers of discontent reached my ears, carried on the wind like omens. Turnus, the Rutulian king, saw us not as settlers but as invaders. He rallied the Latin tribes, stoking their fears and promising them glory in our defeat. His ambition was a viper, poisoning the land. A hunting party strayed too far, and Aeneas, eager to prove himself, loosed an arrow at a stag sacred to the Latins. It was a foolish act, born of youthful exuberance, but it ignited the powder keg of resentment. I attempted to appease the Latins, offering recompense for the sacrilege. But Turnus had already seized upon the incident, using it to rally support for war. My words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the drums of conflict. Turnus, in his thirst for glory, swayed the wavering Latin chieftains. He spoke of Trojan arrogance, of their threat to Latin lands and traditions. His words were honeyed poison, fueling their hatred and inciting them to war. I sought solace in prayer, beseeching the gods for guidance. Omens filled the sky, swirling clouds like faces contorted in rage. The divine winds whispered of bloodshed and sacrifice. The first skirmishes were brutal. Raids and ambushes turned the fertile fields of Latium into killing grounds. The air grew thick with the stench of blood and the cries of the dying. The Latins, fueled by Turnus's rage, attacked with savage fury. They sought to overwhelm us with their numbers, to drive us back into the sea from whence we came. I rallied my men, reminding them of our destiny, of the promise of a new Troy. We fought with the courage of lions, our shields locked, our spears piercing the enemy ranks. Turnus, a whirlwind of destruction, cut through our ranks. His spear found its mark time and again, felling even our bravest warriors. His presence on the battlefield was a dark omen. The battle raged for days, neither side gaining a decisive advantage. The land of Latium was bathed in blood, the seeds of a future empire sown in a field of death. The war had begun. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but the die had been cast. Our destiny lay in this land, purchased with blood and tears. We would fight for it, for the promise of a new Troy, for the future of our people. The siege commenced with a ferocity that shook the very earth. Battering rams pounded against the city gates, while volleys of arrows rained down from both sides. The air was thick with the stench of blood and the cries of the dying. Turnus, ever vigilant, rallied his defenders. His presence was a beacon of courage amidst the storm of war, his every command delivered with the force of a thunderclap. "Hold the line," he roared. "Let no Trojan cur set foot within these walls." Aeneas, seeing an opening, pressed the attack. He led his men through the breach, a whirlwind of steel and fury, cutting down all who stood in his path. "For Troy," he cried, his voice a battle cry that echoed through the carnage. Turnus met Aeneas in the thick of the fighting. Their clash was like the meeting of two great storms, the force of their blows shaking the very ground. The fate of Latium hung in the balance with every parry and thrust. Young Aeneas watched the battle unfold, his heart heavy with fear. He longed for the safety of Troy, for the days before war had consumed their lives. But he knew, with a chilling certainty, that those days were gone forever. The battle raged on, each side paying a heavy price in blood. Aeneas, though weary, fought with the strength of 10 men, his every strike a blow against the enemies of his people. But even victory tasted like ash in his mouth. As the night wore on, the tide began to turn. Turnus, realizing the futility of further resistance, ordered a retreat. The city had fallen, and with it, a piece of his heart. With the dawn came a new era. Aeneas raised the banner of Troy above the conquered city, a symbol of his victory and the beginning of a new kingdom. But the war was far from over. Turnus, refusing to accept defeat, gathered his remaining forces in the countryside. He vowed to drive the Trojans from Latium, to avenge the fallen, and to reclaim his honor. The fires of war still burned bright within him. Aeneas, aware of the threat that Turnus still posed, gathered his advisors. "We must crush Turnus," he declared, "before he can regroup and plunge Latium into further chaos. Our destiny demands it." Turnus, employing guerrilla tactics, launched a series of ambushes against the Trojans. He was a phantom, striking from the shadows, sowing discord and fear amongst the enemy ranks. The land ran red with blood. Aeneas, enraged by Turnus's treachery, vowed to hunt him down and end the bloodshed once and for all. He led his army across the plains of Latium, determined to bring the Rutulian prince to justice. The final reckoning was at hand. The final hour had arrived. The army stood poised, but all eyes were on the space between, where Aeneas and Turnus would decide the fate of Latium. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the nervous shifting of men and the distant cries of gulls. Turnus, fueled by rage and a desperate need to defend his kingdom, accepted the challenge. He bounded into the open field, his golden hair flowing behind him, a figure of fierce pride and defiance. His spear, a symbol of Rutulian power, gleamed in the morning light. The clash was immediate and brutal. Sword met spear in a shower of sparks, the sound echoing across the battlefield. Aeneas, ever mindful of his destiny, fought with a controlled ferocity, each movement precise and purposeful. Turnus, fueled by desperation, pressed his attack, driving Aeneas back with a relentless barrage of blows. His spear thrust with blinding speed, each strike carrying the weight of his kingdom's survival. Aeneas, though strong, was forced onto the defensive. He dodged and weaved, narrowly avoiding the deadly point of Turnus' spear. He knew he had to find an opening, a weakness in his opponent's relentless assault. Aeneas seized his chance. With a swift sidestep, he evaded Turnus' next attack, causing the Rutulian prince to stumble. For the first time, Turnus looked vulnerable, a chink in his seemingly impenetrable armor. Aeneas pressed his advantage. He lunged forward, his sword a blur of steel, and struck Turnus a powerful blow. The Rutulian prince cried out, clutching his side, a crimson stain blossoming on his armor. Turnus, wounded and weakened, fell to his knees. His spear slipped from his grasp, clattering uselessly on the ground. Defeat was imminent, and the realization washed over him, a bitter tide of despair. Aeneas stood over his fallen foe, his sword raised high. The cheers of his army filled the air, a triumphant roar that marked the end of the war. But in Aeneas' eyes there was no joy, only the heavy weight of destiny fulfilled. Young Aeneas watched from afar, his heart filled with a mixture of pride and trepidation. He knew that his father's victory meant a new beginning for their people, a chance to build a lasting legacy in this new land. With Turnus defeated, Aeneas turned his attention to the task of building a new Troy. He oversaw the construction of their settlement, guiding his people with a steady hand, brick by brick. They laid the foundations of their future. As the sun set over the new city, Aeneas stood on a hill, gazing at the burgeoning settlement. He had fulfilled his destiny. The Trojans had found their home, and from this humble beginning, a great empire would rise, its influence echoing through the ages. an empire which even now, in my own medieval time, shapes our world in ways that no one can possibly deny.